Wayne Robertson and I grew up not just in the same city of Cape Town, South Africa, but we grew up with the same love of the sea. We both had very different experiences. I spent 195 days racing solo around the globe. Wayne spent 93 days on a rowboat, going from Cape Town, South Africa, across the Atlantic Ocean to Rio de Janeiro. While we have many different adventures and different ways of looking at things, we also have a lot of things in common. We both have dealt with isolation, with challenges, with starting out to do something when others didn't believe that we could possibly do these things. I'm going to be spending some time and having a conversation with Wayne about his philosophy and how he came to do what he did. He stepped onto a rowboat, never having rowed before. He went across an ocean with a man he barely knew. How did that work out? What were the lessons? What were the experiences? These are some of the things that we are going to find out when we get together. Stay tuned for more. What's it like being on a rowboat?
Being on the rowboat is like being on the microcosm of our world. Our rowboat we were on, it's completely self-sustained and solar powered. It represents the microcosm of our world. Everything on that boat had to sustain us, and we had to look after it extremely well, much like we do on our planet. And it's very cramped, it's very small, it's very minimalist. It has no power other than the power in our arms and our legs going into the oars, and we just have to keep rowing or die.
How long at a time do you row for?
We rowed for 92 days non-stop, totally unassisted, from Cape Town north via St. Helena to Rio, Brazil, and we rowed for 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24/7.
In bad weather?
We had extremely bad weather leaving the Southern Cape. We got pitch poled, we got rolled, capsized numerous times. I lost a lot of gear that was torn off the deck. Mountainous seas, 6 to 8 meter swells, breaking waves, and it was extremely challenging.
I spent years and years dreaming of what it would take to own a yacht, to be a good sailor, and then to race solo across an ocean, and ultimately to race solo around the world. These things just did not happen because I wanted them to happen. These things happened because of planning, preparation, building relationships, finding a way to overcome the different challenges, the different problems.
Transitioned my boat building skills into other projects, and ultimately landed a project in Antarctica where I design and construct composite modular units for people who work down there.
So tell me, what are the conditions like down there for this?
Antarctica conditions are very extreme. It can get down to minus 90 degrees in winter Celsius, about plus 8 in the summer. Wind speeds anything up to 150 knots any other day.
Wow, so very, very extreme. How do you get the stuff down there?
We build all these units in my factory here in Cape Town, and we load it onto an aircraft in Cape Town International Airport, and it gets flown down onto the island. We fly down on a Russian Ilyushin aircraft. It's a big heavy military beast, and we land at about 3 o'clock in the morning. It's still light then, the sun is up, but the temperature is the lowest, so the runway is the hardest, because remember the airplane doesn't have brakes. You can't use natural brakes, it only has air brakes.
Best plans go away, go astray, don't happen, the disappointments. But we hang on to those things.
As part of the things I do, I do a lot of extreme mountain biking, and I've always raced BMX bikes. And one particular weekend, a number of years ago, I hit a jump in a race, crashed out badly, crushed my spine in 3 places. L1, 3 and 5 were crushed. I broke 4 ribs, cracked my pelvis, and paralyzed both my legs, and the doctors said I would never walk again. I spent 2 or 3 months in ICU on a ventilator because my lungs also collapsed. And I never believed that I would never walk again. And it took me just over 1.5 years before I was back on my feet.
Something changed your life.
One of the most life-altering experiences I had was when I was trying to recover from my spinal injury. I was in hospital still. I was still in ICU, and we had to have a CT scan every other day. The health professionals were looking after my injury, and I met this boy who was in the oncology department. He was about 10 or 11 years old. He had no hair. He was undergoing extreme chemotherapy, and he wasn't going to make it. And although I was feeling so sorry for myself when the doctor said to me that I couldn't walk again, or I would never walk again, I looked at this boy and I thought to myself how lucky I am, because I've still got a life ahead of me, even though I might not have legs. Where this kid, his time was up and he knew it, and that made me realize I've been given a second chance. I need to do something with it.
So many young people today, as we look at this next generation, just don't seem to have the stickability. What is the words that we want to use? Because to do what we do, we have to fight so hard for these things, and our youngsters need to know that fight.
I think to answer that question, Neil, I think it comes with adversity. You've experienced a lot of adversity in your life. The adversity that I've experienced, although different, I believe that adversity brings about change. It makes you more aware, it wakes you up, it makes you realize how grateful you should be for what you have.
Fear. When we are out there and the seas are really building strong, how did you cope with your fears?
I must say I didn't really experience fear that much. I wouldn't allow it to control me. I understood very well the predicament that we were in. I understand the sea, and I was always, how can I say, and we always were prepared. We always knew that if the bad weather came, we had a protocol to follow, because when you're so sleep deprived and tired, you can't think about, well, what are you going to do next? What are you going to grab? We had a protocol that we practiced every single day. So fear didn't really come into it for me.
There is a clip that I want to show of you getting to the water and going for a swim. Now, every day you swam.
Yes.
And this particular day, you decided to do something different.
I dived off the boat, and I gave Braam a course to steer, and I swam ahead of the boat by about maybe half a kilometer, quarter of a mile, and filmed Braam rowing past me. And there was a little bit of fear in me in that scene, in that there were no witnesses, and Braam could have continued rowing and no one would have been the wiser. The clip probably shows the boat going off into the distance, and I was starting to get nervous towards the end. But it was quite an experience. It's like the only thing I can relate it to is being an astronaut in the middle of space somewhere. I was swimming in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's 5,000 meters deep. There could be any sharks or any wildlife around there that would like to eat me, but I wouldn't let the fear come into play, and it was quite an amazing experience.
And then we prepare. When we know what we want to do, we begin to act upon it. I had to build a boat, but before I could build a boat, I had to learn to sail. And once I had learned to sail and I was comfortable as a sailor, then it came down to building that boat. And people said, you can't do this, it is impossible, give up. The front page of the Cape Times had a headline story and an article, Petersen sails floating coffin. People thought I was going to kill myself out here on the high seas, in that boat. They saw what I did not have, versus how big the heart and the commitment to the dream was. Being in a boat for so long with another person, what's the setup? How do you row?
The only way to achieve success in an expedition like this was to use teamwork. And we had to work as a team together. We had to look after one another. I had to look after Braam, he had to look after me. and because you suffer extreme fatigue and extreme sleep deprivation, and when you cannot train for that, and you don't realize that things are going wobbly until your mate points it out to you. So
give an example of when you would change watch.
When you would change watch, you'd take your feet out of the straps. You'd have to set the boat up slightly differently because I'm left-handed and Braam is right-handed, so the boat would track slightly differently. And it often became a bit of a bun fight, because when you come off the oars, all you want to do is stop and relax and just rest a bit. Remember, you only have 2 hours to do all the things that need to be done, which means you got to wash, you got to eat, you got to hydrate, and try and get some sleep. So getting back on the oars, you had to try and do it carefully and quietly so that your mate could sleep. It didn't always work out that way. Braam had a few issues now and then in getting his earplugs back in his ears, and they got tangled in the oars. It was sometimes an issue, but by and large we worked as a good team, and we got on with it.
So I think about the first leg. I break every component of this race after the execution into the first leg, second leg, third leg, fourth leg. So each one of those involves starting and starting again. It is about leaving the dock, going out to the start line and raising your sails, and getting across that gun, that starting gun, getting through the spectator fleet, getting through to the other side without suffering the damage of a spectator boat hitting you. The press boats coming up for the last minute photographs and their last minute of comments that they may be able to get if they're close enough to you. The helicopters overhead, getting that footage. Seeing my girlfriend, Gwen, on the power boat that took her off from my boat, having said goodbye before the start, and then one more glimpse after the start, before that support boat turns around with my girlfriend, with my friends, my supporters, and heading home. And then the last of the spectator boats turn around and leave. And now it is just you and the competitors you can see across the horizon. And then soon they too are gone, and you are alone. Alone out there on the high seas. Alone with your thoughts, with your fears, with your concerns, apprehensions. You've got to get through that first day, that first night. Then you've got to get through the first week. And then eventually you keep breaking this down into manageable pieces. 1,000 miles from the start line, eventually 1,000 miles to the finish line, and you count down those days. You're running out of your favorite foods if you're not totally out of them. You're starting to run low on water. You are tired, absolutely exhausted. You want to sleep in a bed that doesn't rock. You want to have a hot shower where you can also use a fair amount of water versus just wiping down with a rag because you're conserving your water. There are so many things that we take for granted in our everyday life that we cannot take for granted on the high seas. Wayne, what were those things that you did not take for granted on the high seas whilst you were rowing?
From an emotional perspective, rowing a vessel across an ocean is extremely grueling. There's no other way to describe it, because it's almost incomprehensible to fathom out how much distance you still have to cover, even though you've been working hard for the last 24, 48 hours. The speed of the vessel is extremely slow compared to a sailing vessel. And even though if you're on a sailing vessel and you've got very little wind, you're still making 2 or 3 knots. On the rowboat, it's the same as riding a bicycle uphill continually. If you stop rowing, the boat stops. If you have wind or current against you, you go backwards. There's no preventing it. You have to keep on going. And the grueling aspect isn't even so much the distance. It's the fact that if you don't row, you will die. There's no one coming to collect you. There's no or very little chance of rescue if you dehydrate, or your water maker breaks, or you run out of food. So the mental aspect is probably the most challenging aspect for any kind of crossing of that kind. and other ocean rowers will testify to it. It's the biggest challenge there is. You can train as much as you like physically, but you cannot train mentally for how your brain perceives the distance you still have to go, and the sleep deprivation, because you don't ever sleep. You sleep for maybe 5-10 minutes at a time if you're lucky.
It's been a really rough few days. We started off with a violent knockdown, which was then preceded by another 2 complete capsize rolls.
In this COVID-19 world, you've come to also learn what isolation is. You can't be with family members. You can't hang out with your friends. These are challenging and difficult times. But in all of these challenging and difficult times, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. One day, I'm going to see land again. One day, I'm going to be in port. One day, I'm going to be able to hug the people who matter to me. Those are the things that keep us going, that give us hope. We can never lose our hope. We both have become motivational speakers, and there are certain messages about the environment that we are all very concerned about, because we only have one planet, Mother Earth, and when we're on our boat, that boat protects us. And I always have a belief that protect the boat will protect you. But that same philosophy also applies to protect our planet, and you've seen some things out there about protecting a planet and being an ocean warrior.
I've been very privileged to have spent a lot of time at sea, but the privilege comes in that I've spent time at the sea recently and a number of years ago, like 20 years ago, and I've been able to see the rapid change in the ocean and the condition of the ocean itself. And it's from the row, it spurred me on to really want to do something about it by creating awareness in people that we need to be proactive and change the way that we behave, because we don't have much time left. The ocean is in a terrible state, all because of the way we behave on this planet. Then there isn't a planet B. So I've changed my tack and become an inspirational, motivational speaker to try and create that awareness within people like us that don't necessarily know about the challenges that we face, and particularly with children, that we need to create an environment where our children have a future. If we continue with the way that we are doing things right now, our children will not have a future, and that's very concerning to me.
Now we're counting the hours and rowing hard. We're digging deep, and yeah, very tired, very sleep deprived. The good thing is that Willow made me this necklace, and it's very special, and it's what we use in time of difficulty.
Well, whether we race a yacht solo around the world or whether we row a boat across the Atlantic Ocean, we are adventurers who are linked by the love of the sea, who are linked by the love of the adventure, who are not daunted by the challenges but are invigorated by what we face and how we can do this and how we can overcome it. And Wayne, what did it feel like for you on that finish line?
It was an absolute feeling of elation. But one thing that struck out to me was the fact that we realized that we're not immortal, that we're mortal beings, and although we accomplished an amazing feat, it took its toll on us physically and mentally. And if we could use that experience to help create more consciousness about people and the way that we are doing business on this planet, then I believe that we've achieved something, and the effort was worth it. The pain and the suffering, although immense, if we could just change one person's view on how we're behaving and how we are treating our home, our planet, then I believe the suffering was worth it.
And also in part of that, we have to address the aspects of poverty and wealth distribution. South Africa has been a poor country. Brazil is a poor country. But in spite of the poverty, there's always hope. And as we change ourselves and we change our behavior, we also have to give other people hope that nothing is impossible, that we truly can do these things, go to the furthest corner of our planet and make a difference. Wayne, thanks for joining me. If you like what we've shared, share it with others, subscribe, like it, but let's together keep making a difference.